Hello everyone, welcome again to the NPTEL course Role of Craft and Technology in Interior Architecture. We will discuss module number 39 today, and it talks about interventions which are market or management based. So we will see some examples, we will see some literature and of course the references, and we have already discussed certain kinds of interventions, and today we are going to focus on the marketing and management based interventions in the craft sector. So the thing is that it's not just about designing a product anymore, and it's not just about doing a particular activity in isolation. So there are a lot of other important factors that have come into picture, and design more and more is becoming very collaborative, and it has become very important to understand the importance of management and marketing, while the designing of course is paramount. So much has increased the importance and the value that we have separate disciplines like design management, and there is a lot of discussion on the marketing as well as the outreach of the craft products, so that the sustainable livelihood can be practiced within the craft communities. Design has evolved from designing single products to focusing on interaction, systems and activities. So there is this plethora of things that come into picture, and that's how the marketing and management has also been introduced in the craft sector scenario, so that the production and the sales, all of it could be increased, the value of craft could be enhanced, and there is more market driven research, there is more outreach, and all of it requires management of different stakeholders and factors that come into play, and it involves different activities and creation of a system. So system thinking is also becoming very important. Within the spectrum of the four orders of design: graphics, products, interaction and systems, craft as a human-centered object and activity can be supported by each of these. So craft is seen as a human-centered object or a product, or as an end result or an end product, and all of these orders come into picture, and it's very important that there is interconnectivity of all these, and they are managed in a very sustainable manner. There are overlaps within these four stages that result in several related factors: production, market and promotion. So while we are talking about management, marketing, another important thing that comes into picture is also promotion. So, and while also by promotion I meant how we establish the value or enhance the value. So all of these researches and literature that we are just going through or referring, they highlight the importance of marketing, management and promotion based interventions, and how it has now become more of a system than just design being an isolated activity. So craft production can meet basic needs. Productivity is not an issue if we think about craft production in terms of meeting the basic needs. Improving quality, not quantity, should be prioritized. So according to this perspective, and this research highlights that maybe the focus has to be improving quality, and of course not the quantity that needs to be prioritized. Meanwhile, there is an experimental trend that encourages design for repair and upgrade to prolong a product's lifespan and reduce resource consumption. So there is also a parallel trend that is going on. Rather than just having a completely new product or just working on the quality and trying to come up with different product ranges and trying to meet the market demand, there is also a sort of a discussion and encouragement given to upgrade and prolong a product's lifespan, an existing product. How could that be upgraded, and how the resource consumption could be reduced? So this itself also comes into the purview of management and trying to manage resources, and not just starting anything from the scratch, but how to upgrade the existing one, and then how to really establish more value for it, and trying to have a parallel range where the new products as well as the existing one try to have a niche market for both of them. So the new trend of innovation and value creation should rely on mass customization and innovative products and services instead of reducing costs and increasing efficiency. So other important thing that the research highlights is, rather than reducing the cost and increasing efficiency, the better way that the researchers suggest is mass customization and innovation in the products and services. This is one way of looking at the creation of craft products for the new market, which is driven by innovation and lot of the hunger for experimentation and new explorations. So while we are talking about market interventions, the existing researches highlight targeting markets from the high, middle and low ends, from the local, domestic to the international, from the mass to the niche. So these the entire spectrum is to be taken care of. So whether it's in high end market and the clientele associated to that, or it's the low end market that is being catered to, and whether it's regional, national, international, and then from the mass to the niche. So all of these markets have to be targeted, and there are different ways of catering to the needs of each market. So market would require valuable products that integrate craftsmanship with contemporary creativity, and we have been talking about it throughout this course module, how we promote and encourage tradition and continuity. So what is already existing, and then how we upgrade it, and how do we have contemporary expressions and needs taken care by it. So market value standards could be based on the degree of, first is inheriting traditional techniques and materials, and second is innovating techniques, materials and design. And there could be permutation and combination of both of these. So to realize these directions, there would be a need to establish standards of entry for the domestic market. So while we are talking about marketing and management, and we are trying about new approaches to come up with different craft products and to improvise the existing range, there is also a mention of establishing standards, so that there is some kind of a benchmark, and how is the entire market being tapped to understand that there is some benchmark, so that some standard could be achieved. So all of these important things are highlighted by different researches. Another approach to open untapped markets would be to develop customized and bespoke artifacts that could raise the craft's market values. So there is again the emphasis on customization, because that's what is unique about each craft product and the craft form. They are customized, and when the craft person works on it, every piece is different from what he or she has created already. So that kind of customization and human centered approach, and doing by hands, and each time each piece looks very unique, is something that has to be capitalized upon, even if new markets are being tapped. So that's one thing the researchers are highlighting again and again. So if we try to understand the distribution channels, and here we are talking about the Indian handicrafts. So here we talk about the craft persons, the natural resources, some market based resources that are procured, and some other raw material forms which are provided by some organizations. And the craft persons, the craft communities, they have their own skills, and they work on a particular product range or a craft form. And then from here there could be an either either an individual activity or it could be a group activity like an NGO or a self-help group. And then there is value addition in terms of capacity building by central and state departments, other NGOs and other master craft persons and trainers, some workshops. So the value addition is done and then the product development stage is achieved. From there the market linkages are explored, and there is also financial institutions that support at this stage, and they try to fund the product development and then link with the market. And once the markets are tapped, then there is an outreach and where the product is sold. So there are local hats and melas, there are international and national exhibitions, and then there are institutional outlets also. So that's how from this stage till the outreach, the entire cycle takes place and the distribution channels are put into place. So this is just one example, and here we see the importance of establishing market linkages, because otherwise the craft wouldn't sustain, the craft persons wouldn't sustain, and it's not anymore just a utility based practice. Craft has evolved with time, it has changed a lot, and there is a lot of linkage with the industry, there is a lot of linkage with the market, so that there is the livelihood generation for the craft communities who are already facing a lot of problems in the craft sector. Their current generations are leaving the practice, a lot of craft forms are languishing. So establishing market linkages and getting financial support and the management of all of these different stakeholders and this channel is very important, and that's what is being talked about in different policies and different researches currently, specifically talking about the craft sector in the Indian context. So innovation in product marketing and distribution is afforded by web-based technologies. So while we are talking about product marketing and distribution, we are also talking about the technology intervention, and there is a lot of focus these days on the web-based technologies, particularly social media, like I was telling in the previous module also, which offer makers new venues and means for communicating value and brand image building. So there is more outreach, there is communication, and there is also the brand image building. New routes to global markets, new opportunities to engage with customers, and possibilities for growing professional networks. So again, this is one way of looking at the marketing and the distribution, where web-based technologies are integrated and new avenues are explored. There is a need for entrepreneurship and strategic business skills, knowing the market, of course, so the market research comes very handy, customers and competitors, along with a clear understanding of products positioning, knowing how to communicate the value of products, which can stand in product attributes, the process of making or maker's skills, skills to enable a seamless use of a variety of web-based tools for displaying products for sale, communicating attributes and engaging with customers. So it's very important how to engage your customers, how to really highlight the attributes of the products, and how effective is the service which is being given to them. And that's the research which is happening, and they are trying to enhance the web-based technologies and trying to make it more transparent and more accessible to the customers and the consumers. So here if we see the potential for interventions in crafts, and this is the case of China, one case study that I came across, and here we are seeing at the market level what they are discussing is development of international and daily use markets. So again, the different markets at different levels, different kinds of product ranges targeting different markets, and then within that there is technique, innovation, productivity. So construction of websites and digital platforms for selling products and market analysis, they are mentioning that over here. And then while we are talking about the value creation and entrepreneurial skill, that is the economic viability, there is a mention of exploration of untapped market for specific needs. So this is also an interesting way to look at things, where there are specific needs and there are highly customized products that are delivered. Branding and trademark, high market value based on high quality hand skills. Like if we see the Japanese craft, they are known for their quality and craftsmanship and hand skills. So there are different ranges which are possible, which could cater to the different kinds of markets and different kinds of consumers, and to identify that and accordingly indulge in the market targets and try to manage this entire system is something which is of paramount importance these days as far as the craft sector is concerned, and actually the entire creative industries are concerned. So inheritance and continuation, they also keep into mind the tradition and continuity part, where there is inheritance and then there is continuity. So preservation of historic marketplaces, development of customization and bespoke objects, development of local market to meet local needs. So while there is importance given to the international or the global market, where there is a lot of exchange of cultures, and one country's craft forms are really appreciated and looked forward to by the other country, it's also very important to take care of the local needs and what the local market demands are. So this is at the market level, this research. It also talks about different kinds of interventions possible through education, and at the product level what could be the kinds of interventions. So like we have already discussed these product, process, technology, but just to give an overview, they are also mentioning about these product level interventions, biodegradable materials and innovation across traditional techniques, modification and redesign of crafts, innovation in function, form, use and materials, then value increase by focusing on input in craftsmanship, creativity, innovation. Originality is again the word, it does not have to really lose its originality, and yes, emotions as well. And here again, preservation of what already exists and how to improvise upon it. There is also discussion on interventions at the production level. And yes, while we are talking about marketing and management, there also the focus is given to the promotion level as well, and where in this particular case of China, they are talking about international exhibitions and related art events, interactive and digital museums, knowledge exchange activities, different kinds of conferences and convergence of craft persons, artisans. And in terms of the technology innovation, again they are talking about certain things, and like a series of transformation of historical buildings or studios through modern design and technologies is something that they have suggested. So here we are talking about building crafts, that has been an important part of our course module. And here very interestingly, storytelling and narratives of heritage craft. So we have been already discussing about the storytelling crafts, the narrativity that they have, and the different kinds of crafts that happen at a surface level and tell stories. So there could be a lot of development while focusing on this aspect. Then yeah, other things again, as far as the inheritance and continuity is concerned, making use of historical sites or buildings such as studios, museums, residential houses, and utilizing them and preserving them. All these kinds of interventions they are looking forward at the promotion level while talking about the crafts in China. Here if we talk about a craft product or craft as an activity in terms of production and an end result, so there are different elements that combine to create a craft product. There is the play of materials, what kind of product it is, what is the style, design style, and what is the technique which is employed. So, materials, again, there is this whole inventory that could be tapped, and there could be different materials, raw materials, textiles. We have already seen how crafts could be classified in terms of materials. So, different materials over here. And why it is important is, if the craft product is deciphered in these forms in terms of these elements, it helps understand the management. It also helps understand the value chain. So it's important and it's interesting to break the product in terms of these different elements. And the product type, whether it's a homeware or it's a piece of jewelry or it's an apparel, fashion accessory, is it a garden furniture, or some kind of stationery, and are there some toys that are being looked at. So again, this is also a sort of a system of deciphering a craft product in terms of different elements. So if we talk about the design style here, so like we saw some examples from Gujarat where the styles were also listed while we were discussing some building crafts of Gujarat. So whether it is traditional, culturally inspired, is it contemporary, or is it just in vogue or in trend, and then what kind of technique, is it carving, casting, is it hand building, is it mosaic, papier-mâché, sculpting, weaving, welding. So this itself tries to give us a sort of a methodology to understand the craft product in terms of different elements, and to create a sort of a system to understand right from the raw materials to the process to the product, and then understand in the value chain, like I said, because when we are talking about materials, they have to be procured either through natural resources or through some market, like what we saw in the diagram initially in one of the slides. And while we are talking about technique, it is important to also understand which craft cluster practices that and what kind of skills are involved, what tools would be required. So again, breaking it into this system tries to give us a system of management and understanding, and to work with the craft form. Talking about indicative market positioning options for craft products, this example over here is the Western Cape Microeconomic Development Strategy, and what they have tried to enlist is certain characteristics and the market positioning. So we see the market positioning options for craft products, and they have tried to come up with certain categories over here. So predominantly functional items, so what kind of quality from medium to high, price is medium or high, so is it for a very specific class, or is it more of a popular product that is it's not very specific to a certain group. And then types of retail outlets, scale of production, purchasing criteria, coordination. So again, classifying in this particular way also helps understand the market positioning, to understand the user group, which kind of user group is demanding this particular kind of a product or this particular category classification, or the range of products. So here these are like functional items. Then there are some fashion led items which also have certain characteristics that have been defined as part of this framework under this strategy that we are talking about. Gifts and novelty items again is another category, and then corporate gifts is another category. So this helps understand the end user in different categories and what kind of scale of production is involved, what is the economics involved, and what kind of outreach it requires, what kind of management a particular category of these products requires, what is their market position, how much is the demand, and accordingly the supply has to be worked. So this again is a interesting way to come up with certain attributes and position craft in terms of the market demand. So some more categories over here. So we see collectibles. So here we see the quality high, and price point is again medium to high. So these are more like collections. The cultural artifacts, again there are different ranges as far as price is considered, and the qualities also. So low to high. Souvenirs over here, and then socially responsible fair trades, again they have their different attributes. So this is extensive research and it helps understand the market positioning of different craft objects. Also trying to understand the value chain, again for the Western Cape, the study that focused the previous few slides as well. And here we see the design, inputs, services and distribution, and then after the design is there, the inputs are there, there is production, it goes to the retail and then it goes to the consumers. So there is this sort of value chain which is proposed for the Western Cape, and we see this services and distribution over here. So what I am trying to say is that we discussed very briefly what a value chain means in one of the previous modules, and when we are talking about marketing, management, craft sector, it's very important to understand value chain. What is the value chain of that particular, craft sector? Like what we discussed in the previous module about Dholka in Gujarat, we studied their value chain as well, from where the material comes and where is the market where it is finally transported. So that value chain is important because if the value chain is not known and different stakeholders are not known, then of course there will be a sort of a gap in the production of the craft and the outreach and its saleability. So it's very important to understand the value chain, to analyze it, understand the market, what is the demand, and accordingly work with the supply part. So the factors that drive companies to go global. We are talking about the market, we are talking about the value chain, we are talking about different market targets from local to international. So if we have to talk about factors that drive companies to go global, one of the important factors are again market forces, and we are talking about here market forces. Of course there are other forces as well, but yeah, market forces are also one of the important ones. If we try to understand the market channels, so if we see this example of the handicraft sector and we are talking about the global market, so it is very crucial to understand the market channels. If the market channels are not known and the demand is not known, again the demand supply management won't be possible, and there will be again lot of gap from production to the sales. So starting from the artisans over here, we have different stakeholders and different channels. So there is an agent who buys, there is an exporter, there is an organization involved, there is a wholesale importer who is involved, and then there are different important retailers over here and different stores over here, where right from here the product reaches at these different retailers. And finally there are consumers, and there are between linkages as well. So if these market linkages are not known and they are not studied, and especially because the artisans and craft persons are not very well informed about all the linkages and policies, that's all the more where it becomes very important to have the marketing and management skills or entrepreneurship skills, which could work in the favor of the artisans, or they work in collaboration with such groups and such skilled people, or the best is that they get trained in it. So we are talking about the market interventions, and for that it's very important to see what is the value chain and market channels, and the different countries and different markets, what is the kind of channel that they are following and what is currently happening. So to understand the supply chain management, because we have been talking about marketing and management, and of course the demand supply chain, it comes into picture. So this is the varied literature that we see which talks about the supply chain management, and there are certain definitions that are given here so that we can understand what is the supply chain management all about. So it is defined as planning and controlling all of the business processes right from the end customer to raw material suppliers that link together partners in a supply chain in order to serve the needs of the end customer. So, it is very important to understand how all the stakeholders are linked together and then the end customer's needs are met. Another definition according to another literature says, all the activities involved in delivering a product from raw material through to the customer, including sourcing raw materials and parts, manufacturing and assembly, warehousing and inventory tracking, order entry and order management, also distribution across all channels, delivery to the customer, as well as the information systems necessary to monitor all of these activities into a seamless process. That is again supply chain management, to make it a very seamless process and link all these activities which are a part of this chain. Then it involves the coordination of an organization's internal planning, manufacturing and procurement efforts with those of its external partners. So, even that kind of coordination is paramount, that the internal and the external stakeholders coordinate well. The supply chain management is a set of approaches utilized to efficiently integrate suppliers, manufacturers, warehouses and stores so that the merchandise is produced and distributed at the right quantities, to the right locations and at the right time, in order to minimize system-wide cost while satisfying service level requirements. So, all of it is mentioned in the literature, and by these different perspectives and definitions, it has been made to understand how does a supply chain management actually works. Now, when we talk about the supply chain management, there is also literature that tries to explain us the differences between domestic supply chain and the global supply chain. So, when we see the domestic supply chain, it supplies within the country as the name suggests, and here it is an international supply chain. The risk is less here compared to this one which we see on the right hand side. Then there are less security issues in the domestic supply chain, and here it is a high risk factor involved as far as the security issues are concerned. Also, when we talk about the payment, there are less issues associated with the payment, and here because there are international suppliers and vendors involved, sometimes the issues regarding payment crop up. There are regulatory issues which can be less as it operates within the country, and here the issues could be very complex because there are different countries involved, and all the countries have different regulatory issues, regulations, terms and conditions. Here the supplier selection is an easy process, here it is slightly difficult. Mode of payment is easy in the domestic supply chain, and here it involves of course the currency fluctuation, and there may be certain complex problems which get involved during the process. Quickly also trying to understand what are the drivers that come into picture when the supply chain management is discussed, and what are the functions which are assigned to these drivers. So, the drivers could be facilities, inventory, transportation, information, sourcing, pricing, and they have different functions assigned. So, the facilities, this facilitates inventory supply from its location. Inventory is to meet demand and supply in the supply chain. Transportation, faster delivery of items. Information facilitates transparency and communication among drivers in the supply chain, and sourcing decides when to source. Pricing, firm builds its competitive strategy, how the pricing should be. Also trying to understand again the drivers continued from the previous slide. If we see this umbrella term over here, the competitive strategy, the supply chain strategy is somewhere a subset to this. Then there is a certain structure embedded within the supply chain strategy, and then it has certain logistical drivers that drive this supply chain management. So, we saw all these drivers in the previous slide. So, facilities, inventory, transportation, information, sourcing, pricing, and then how are they interconnected, and there are certain activities which are generated by these interconnections, and this entire supply chain structure works and the supply chain strategy is put in place, and that's how competitively the markets are dealt with. So when we talk about the supply chain, especially in the context of India, again there are certain issues that have been highlighted, and we see here a lot of issues being listed according to the different literature and the observations that have emerged. So there are issues related to taxation, of course infrastructure we have been talking about. Then we see here the global connectivity, demanding customers, and of course supply and demand, whether there is a mismatch between the two or are they on the same planes. Security related to the supply chain. Then of course there are certain local factors into play, a Bandh culture and things like that. Supply chain risk, supplier risk, and then transportation. So all of these issues have been highlighted, and this side of the table explains them in detail. So we see poor infrastructure, we see sometimes policies of less tax in certain locations compared to the other locations. Then the need to increase connectivity, at an international platform, that has been felt. And of course we were talking about the supply chain management, and then this is what we see, that the supply and demand, it is sometimes difficult to meet and then difficult to take care of the mismatch that happens between the two, and lot of security issues, and then some unavoidable supply chain risks that's there. Also sometimes it is difficult to find the type of supplier, and infrastructure problems have been cropping up again and again, and sometimes it's also very difficult to manage the transportation within some regions of India. So all these issues we see over here, and then that's the concern and the challenge as far as the supply chain is concerned in India. So we have discussed about lot of things today, and the next module we will of course talk about the summary and discourse of week 8, the all 4 modules that we saw. Plus there is also a special section that talks about spatial interventions, since we are talking about this integration of craft and interior architecture, and how these craft forms create space, and how these are very important in terms of space making. And because we are talking about building crafts, it is very important that we also touch upon, even briefly if we are able to do so within the less time that we have at our disposal, let's also discuss these spatial interventions. So some references now. Thank you.